Hey, what's up? Hello, welcome back. Location number 7691 because I keep moving. So recently you'll have seen that Becks tagged me in the Midyear book Freakout tag. Interestingly named. It's the middle of the year. This is the lowest number of books that I have ever put up on my Goodreads challenge just because I knew I was going to be incredibly busy, and in a way I very much have. So I'm not really freaking out because I have read 13 out of 15, so I'm doing a pretty good job. However, it is the middle of the year, and Bex is right. I don't think in the entire time that we have had this channel that either of us have ever really looked back at the midpoint in the year to see what our favorites were, what we liked the most. We sort of wait till the end of the year to do a wrap up about all of that. And so this has been an interesting tag to sort of sit and look over everything that I have read and think about it in a little more depth. So if you follow us on Twitter, you'll note my outpouring of adoration for the public library in my city here. And I have read most of the books that I've read this year borrowed from the library, so I haven't got the physical books themselves, only a few of them I actually have to show you. But regardless of that, let's get started. So the first question is the best book that you've read in 2018. And undoubtedly, that's a book that I read much earlier in January. It is Foolish Hearts by Emma Mills. You can watch my review of it to get my full thoughts, but it is a really sweet and touching piece of YA. It's her third book that she has written now, and it sort of follows the loose plot of A Midsummer Night's Dream. It's a really, really lovely, lovely, touching book, and it just made me very, very happy to read. I read it twice. I think in 48 hours. It was an excellent choice, and definitely the best book that I've read this year. So then we move to the best sequel that you read in 2018. I have read one full series this year and sort of had to catch up with the rest of the Flavia de Luce books that had come out in the time that I was living abroad. So the most recent one is called The Graves of Fine and Private Place. It's the 9th in the series, and the main character Flavia, who I understand her name is pronounced Flavia, but that is very difficult for me to remember, so I'm just going to keep saying it incorrectly knowingly, changes a lot in this book. She's sort of reaching a point in her life where she is learning how to become a young woman instead of just like a lovely precocious child, and the series shifts a lot. There are a lot of really big changes in her life, and she is sort of forced because of those changes to grow up even more quickly. And it happens, all of these changes happen right near the end of the series. There are only going to be 10, and the 10th one I think is being written at the moment. The book is different from the others, but it is different from the others in a really good way, and it's very, very neatly done. And so that has definitely been, I think, the best sequel that I have read so far. So a new release that you haven't read but want to. Interesting answer to this question. It is The Female Persuasion by Meg Wolitzer. Now, I have read a YA book of hers, and I also own The Interestings, which I had meant to read this spring and didn't get the opportunity to. It's still sitting on my shelf, and I really need to get around to it. However, I was not super thrilled with the first book of hers that I had read, and so it made me, I think, a little bit skeptical to pick up any more work. But this book, I keep seeing it in bookstores and I keep seeing it pop up on the internet, and I just haven't picked it up, even though it feels very current and very timely. It's a very, very sort of in the moment kind of novel, and I've read a lot about it. I've read an interview with her about the book. I've read some reviews of it so far, and I really need to get to it, but I just haven't seemed to manage it yet. And hopefully I will. Similarly is the fourth question here, which is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And for that, I have a definite answer. It is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. As you know, I've read all of John Green's work, and I am keen to see this book by his brother based on John's high recommendation of it so far, and its very sort of socially relevant plot. I'm very, very interested to check out Hank's first sort of foray into the novel writing world. So I think that's coming out in September. So definitely looking forward to that. Now, this next question, which is the biggest disappointment book of the year for me so far. I considered a couple different options, but then I had to strike my original thought because I sort of went into it without really high expectations, and it met my very low expectations, so I guess that's not really as much of a disappointment as some other books were, and so I have selected The Arcadians by Lloyd Alexander. If you follow me on Goodreads, you'll know that there have been a lot of books that have gone on and then a couple months later off my currently reading list, and that's because I've lost interest in a number of books this year, this being one of them. Lloyd Alexander is the author of one of my very favorite series ever, The Chronicles of Prydain, and I was hoping that this would definitely live up to the excitement of that, and I got about 4 or 5 chapters in and just wasn't thrilled anymore. This is a children's book, and it should be something that I should be able to fly through, and I was bored. Which is odd to me because I really enjoy his writing style. He works a lot in making his work based loosely on mythology, and this just didn't feel as compelling, and perhaps like I disappointed myself by hyping him up a little bit too far in my head, but I intend to sort of try this again. Like I said, it's a children's book and I intend to finish this before the end of the year, but this so far has been probably the most disappointing thing for me. The biggest surprise, conversely, this is question number 6, was the Percy Jackson series. I didn't really intend to pick it up. I was doing some work while I was in the library earlier this year, and I saw it sitting on the shelf, and I had watched another review of a favorite, I think it was a Mythology Favorites. I'll link it down below. I'll find it and link it down below. I'm really blanking on who it is right now. Greek mythology was not something that I was ever taught in school, in middle school or high school, which seems like a real gap in my education looking back at it. Becks definitely got to study it a little bit more because we had different teachers when we were in middle school, but I personally had a very, 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 very limited introduction to Greek mythology, and I really don't know a lot about it. It's like my one really big academic blind spot, unless you count hard sciences. And so I picked this up because I was like, okay, mythology, interesting. Other people are talking about it. And I really, really, really enjoyed it. It has pushed me to learn a lot more about Greek mythology, and I really liked the way that the gods and goddesses were characterized in that series. More to come on this. I'm going to do a review of the entire series as well on this channel. So favorite new author is the next question. I don't think I've read anything by a new author, so I am going to go the new to you route. And say Peter Mayle. He is the author of A Year in Provence and the other Provence books, which I am still in the middle of. They are sort of little snippets of stories by him, and I'm really, really enjoying them, but it's just been off my radar recently in terms of what I want to pick up. And so he has been really delightful to read when I have read him. He's a lovely writer. He's a British gentleman, and I think that his insight into his own experience is quite critical, and I don't think we read that a lot when we read biographical or autobiographical work sometimes. So definitely someone to look back into. Also, he's writing about Provence, which is a place that I really want to go, so that probably has a lot to do with it too. This next question is newest fictional crush, which, based on the limited amount of books that I have read so far this year, is a difficult question for me to answer because none of the characters have really stuck out for me as fictional crushes. However, as usual, I am doing my annual reread of The Truth About Forever by Sarah Dessen, so I am going to cheat real hard on this question and say Wes from The Truth About Forever because he is always my fictional crush. He's a delight. Newest favorite character is a little bit easier. It is hands down Persephone, who gets a little bit of play in the last Percy Jackson book, The Last Olympian, I think it is. And she is just written so interestingly. Her interactions with Hades and Demeter in there, I think, are really funny. And I think she's written nicely. That book inspired me to learn a lot more about her specifically. And so she is definitely my favorite character, I think, so far. I know, it's a kind of a weird, obscure choice, but I'm sticking by it for sure. A book that made you cry. Interestingly, I'm definitely a bit more of a crier than Becca is, but none of these books have made me cry so far. Only internally, I guess, about how unfortunate it is that I have picked so many of them up and then put so many of them back down, but nothing has really moved me to tears, not even Foolish Hearts so much. It's a surprise, I know, but it's true. And speaking of Foolish Hearts, it's again my answer for this question, which is a book that made you happy. Again, if you want a really nice piece of YA, please go read it. Book to movie adaptation. What is my favorite book to movie adaptation that I have seen this year? Interestingly, I've seen very, 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 very few movies this year. And so I really only have one answer, and that is A Wrinkle in Time, which actually I didn't really enjoy. I thought it was beautifully done. I thought the casting was great. Maybe I needed to read the book before I had seen it, because it seemed like a movie where that was definitely something, like you knew the story going into it. The story didn't seem very spelled out for me, but I was sort of bored watching it. I know you're all thinking, how have you not read A Wrinkle in Time? I just haven't read A Wrinkle in Time. But I thought it was a nice piece of entertainment, but I was not as intrigued as I wanted to be. So there it is, book to movie adaptation. Coming into the end here, the penultimate question, the most beautiful book that you've bought or have been given. This one I actually do have. It is Shirley Jackson's Let Me Tell You. It's a nice hardcover edition. I thought that this was just like a beautiful floral green vegetative emergence of this face here. It's a lovely hardcover, and it has a ribbon bookmark as well, which is always sort of a nice touch. Shirley Jackson is the author of We Have Always Lived in the Castle, as well as The Lottery, which is a short story. I've talked about both on this channel before. She's definitely pretty dark, and I'm really excited to sort of get into these a little bit later, probably in the fall of this year is my goal. But I have done a review on that book too, if you want to check it out. Lastly here, what books do you need to read this year? A lot of them. There are probably more books on the shelf that I have here that I haven't read than that I have, which is disappointing. Also disappointing considering I did not do well at reading a lot of the books that were in my spring TBR video. So, that being said, I still very much need to read The Power by Naomi Alderman. I brought this book with me when I was recently in Scotland this summer and just didn't have the chance to pick it up because I was running around like a crazy person. I did try and read it a little bit on the plane, but I kept getting very distracted, and so I really do want to read this. I've talked about this book, I think, a couple times now, so I need to read this. And similarly, I've bought myself Michel Foucault's Power/Knowledge, which, in keeping in the power vein, I'm going to be using this for a lot of the academic work that I'm still doing right now, and I'm so excited to find it in a bookstore here because there is no Foucault in my local library, and that's a failing if you ask me. So that's the tag there. I haven't really got anyone else to tag either. Becks has already done it. So there you have it. If you enjoyed this video, perhaps try it for yourself. It's interesting to sort of have a look back at what you've read so far and realize, as I have done, exactly the dearth of what you have read and all of the things that you want to read. As always, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned. Becks and I have some interesting stuff in the works here, which I won't say any more about, but it'll be fun. Anything you might want to know about us is in the description below. I hope you're having lovely weeks and lovely lives, and we'll see you very soon.